Maya Reyes had a way of moving through a hospital that most people never noticed. She did not rush, she did not drag her feet. She simply moved, with a quiet purpose, that made it look like she always knew exactly where she needed to be, and exactly how much time she had to get there. The other nurses at Mercy General had grown used to her over the 6 years she had worked the ICU floor. She was dependable, she was calm, she never raised her voice, not even when the machines were screaming and a patient's numbers were falling fast. Most of them liked her well enough. A few of them thought she was a little cold. None of them really knew her. It was a Tuesday night in late autumn when the laughter happened. The break room was small and too bright, the kind of room that made everyone look tired even when they weren't. Maya had come in to refill her coffee. She was working a double shift, and the mug in her hand was her third of the night. She set it under the machine and waited, and while she waited, she stretched her arms above her head, the way a person does when their back has been tight for hours. Her sleeve slipped down. Just a few inches, just enough. One of the younger nurses, a woman named Carla, who had been at Mercy General for less than a year, spotted it first. She leaned forward in her chair and squinted.
"What is that?"
she said, not unkindly, but with the kind of curiosity that has no filter. Maya looked down at her forearm. The tattoo was old. The ink had faded over time to a soft, blurry blue-gray. It showed a shape, a trident with wings, and beneath it, small but still readable, 2 letters and a number, ST6. "Oh my goodness," said another nurse from across the table, a man named Brendan, who laughed at everything. "Did your ex-boyfriend make you get that?" A few people smiled. Someone else made a comment about how it looked like something from a video game. Carla said she thought it was actually kind of cute, in a retro sort of way, which somehow made it worse. Maya did not get angry. She did not explain herself. She pulled her sleeve back down, picked up her coffee mug, and walked back out to the floor. She always walked back to the floor. What the people in that break room did not know, what no one at Mercy General knew, because Maya had never told them, was that the tattoo had not come from a boyfriend, or a phase, or a game. It had been given to her by a group of men who did not give that mark to anyone lightly. She had been a combat rescue officer for 14 years, attached to some of the most demanding special operations units in the United States military. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 deployment that still did not appear on any document that a regular person could request or read. The men she served with had called her Echo, not because she repeated things, because when they called for help, she answered. Every single time. She had left the military at 37, after a mission in eastern Afghanistan that had taken 2 of her teammates and left her with a fractured shoulder and a kind of silence inside her that no amount of talking seemed to touch. She had spent a year recovering, physically and otherwise. Then she had gone back to school, earned her nursing credentials, and arrived at Mercy General as quietly as she did everything else. Nobody asked too many questions. She preferred it that way. The night the helicopters came was a Thursday in March. It was just past midnight when the emergency system at Mercy General lit up with an alert. A military transport convoy had been involved in a serious road accident on the interstate about 12 miles east of the city. The numbers were not good. 17 people injured, 4 of them critical. The emergency department moved into high gear. Nurses and doctors took their positions. Supply carts rolled. The charge nurse, a steady woman named Patricia who had seen everything in 22 years on the floor, began directing traffic with the calm authority of someone who had prepared for exactly this. Maya had been reassigned to a float shift that night and was already in the emergency wing helping with a separate patient when the alert came through. She heard the numbers. She heard the word convoy. She felt something shift behind her eyes. Not fear, not excitement. Just a very old and very familiar recognition. She was already moving. The sound of the helicopters reached the building before anyone saw the lights. 2 of them, coming in fast and low, one landing on the rooftop helipad, and one descending into the far end of the parking lot, in a way that was unusual, and told anyone who understood these things that the situation was more serious than a standard transport. The first group of patients came through the ER doors on stretchers. Nurses and doctors swarmed them, machines beeped, voices called out numbers, blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen levels. The room was loud and bright and full of motion. Then the second group arrived from the parking lot helicopter, and among them was a man whose condition made several people stop moving for just a fraction of a second. He was a special operations soldier, still in partial gear, with a serious chest injury. His airway was compromised. His blood pressure was dropping in a way that did not respond to the first interventions the team tried. The attending physician, a young doctor named Marcus, who was excellent under most circumstances, looked at the numbers, looked at the patient, and hesitated. It was a small hesitation, half a second, maybe less. But in a trauma bay, half a second is a long time. Maya stepped in from the left side of the stretcher. She did not ask for permission. She did not announce herself. She simply said, in a clear and even voice, "I need a needle decompression kit, right now," and held out her hand. The scrub nurse gave it to her without thinking, responding to the tone of someone who knows exactly what they are doing. Maya worked quickly. Her hands were steady. She performed the procedure with a confidence and precision that made the room quiet around her, not because people stopped moving, but because something in the way she moved made everyone around her feel, instinctively, that this was under control now. The soldier's numbers began to stabilize. The attending physician exhaled and stepped back in to manage the next phase of care. The crisis passed, and that was when the door from the parking lot side opened again, and a man walked in. He was not in uniform. He wore civilian clothing, dark, practical, worn in the way that field gear gets worn after years of real use, rather than display. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, with a face that had seen sun and wind and a great deal of time outdoors, and he moved through a crowded room the way very few people can, taking up exactly the space he needed and no more, but making it very clear that he belonged wherever he was standing. He looked around the trauma bay with quick, scanning eyes. Then he saw her. He stopped. Maya looked up from the patient and met his gaze across the room. "Echo," he said. His voice was not loud. It cut through the noise of the room anyway. She straightened. Something in her face changed. Not dramatically, not visibly to most people, but to someone watching closely, it would have looked like a door opening after a very long time. "Sierra," she said. His name, his call sign, was Sierra. His real name was Daniel Voss. He had been a Master Chief Petty Officer in the Navy for 22 years. He had worked alongside Maya on 2 of her deployments, including the last one. He was the kind of man that other soldiers described, when pressed, as the person they wanted standing next to them when things went wrong. He crossed the room to her side. He put one hand briefly on her shoulder, the same shoulder that had been fractured years ago, and looked at her with the straightforward acknowledgement of someone who has shared real experience with another person and needs no words to explain it. "I asked them to route the transport to this hospital," he said quietly. "I knew you were here." She did not ask how he had known. Of course he had known. People like Daniel always knew where their people were. As the night stretched into the early morning hours and the last of the critical patients were stabilized, the story came out. Not from Maya. She said almost nothing about herself, as was her way. It came from Daniel, who sat in a small waiting area off the emergency wing, with Patricia the charge nurse, and 2 other staff members, who had stayed past the end of their shifts, too wired from the night's events to leave. He told them about a mission in 2011, in a mountainous region of eastern Afghanistan. He told them about a team that came under sudden, intense fire from multiple directions. 2 men went down immediately. Their medic was hit not long after. The extraction helicopter was still 11 minutes out. In those 11 minutes, he said, 1 person held that position. 1 person moved between the 2 fallen operators, keeping them alive with field trauma care, while simultaneously helping direct cover fire to keep the rest of the team from being overrun. She did this alone. She did not stop. She did not break. Both men survived. Her name was Lieutenant Maya Reyes. Her call sign was Echo. She had been recommended for a commendation that was later classified along with the details of the mission itself. She had never spoken of it publicly. She had come home, recovered from her injury, retrained as a civilian nurse, and gotten on with the work of saving lives in a different kind of room. The tattoo on her forearm, he told them, was not a decoration or a whim. It had been given to her by the men of that unit, men who did not extend that symbol to anyone who had not stood in the dark and done something real. She had earned it in the most absolute sense of the word. The break room was quiet for a long time after that. When the morning shift began arriving, and the night shift started to go home, word had already spread in the way that things spread in a hospital. Quietly, quickly, person to person. By 7 in the morning, most of the staff knew the outline of the story. By 8, there was a different kind of energy around Maya Reyes, a new awareness that followed her down the hall and stood in the corners of conversations. She noticed. She said nothing. Carla, the young nurse who had spoken first in the break room, found Maya at the coffee machine just before the end of the shift. She stood next to her and looked down at her own cup for a moment. She did not quite know what to say. There was no easy way to apologize for something you had not known was wrong, but somehow still felt the weight of. Maya poured her coffee. She glanced at Carla, with the same steady expression she wore at all times, and then she did something small that said everything it needed to say. She gave a single, quiet nod. The kind that means, "We are fine, move forward." Carla nodded back, and that was that. Maya Reyes never gave an interview. She did not accept the administrator's offer to be featured in the hospital's newsletter. She did not change anything about the way she worked, or the way she carried herself through the halls of Mercy General. She still moved with the same quiet purpose. She still refilled her coffee at the same machine. She still said little and noticed everything. But after that night, when something went wrong in the ICU, when a patient took a sudden turn and the room needed someone who would not flinch, someone who had already stood in worse places than this and found a way through, the staff knew who to look for. They looked for the woman with the faded tattoo. They looked for Echo, and she was always there.